Hi, so my name is Kate, and I'm here to talk a little bit about a few things that I've learned in the interim in which I was not on the website. For those who don't know, I play Sibel and a few other characters, a few dozen other characters, and I don't know, there are a few things that have occurred to me, sort of inspired by some of the people on staff here, and some just, I guess, organic experiences I've had that I thought I'd like to share. The first thing, I'll just get right into it, is thinking like a storyteller. I know it's something that after Jen recently posted up pathfinding as the new magic, which is awesome, basically she had to add this blurb where she was like, the help desk isn't for general permissions. I wish, more people would think like a storyteller. Which prompted some interesting ideas on my end, where, later on today I was saying to Balderdash, well, it would be kind of funny if all of the players got put through storyteller boot camp. So what would that entail, right? What does it mean to think like a storyteller? And what I feel that it means are, it's a couple of things. So first thing would be the necessity of forward momentum in a thread. Because I find that one of the chief ways to kill your story, your collaborative story, is to always be looking at the other person. And when you leave another player constantly holding the bag in terms of moving things along because you're uncertain or you're scared or you're not inspired or whatever, inevitably that person's going to not really want to write with you. Or you could be doing it to yourself without even realizing it. I think that I've had a lot of failed threads because they were just meet and greets that we slapped together with no thought at all, where we kept looking at one another to come up with some sort of interesting event that didn't seem like weird and out of place, and then nothing happened. And that's not the point. I have enough tense small talk with people on a regular basis. I don't need to write about it too, right? So that leads me to my next point. Well, almost. I do want to conclude that thought by saying to always be thinking in terms of giving the other person you're writing with, be generous, give them a lot to respond to. And don't be afraid to take the reins. I mean, send someone a private message if you're really concerned, but always be thinking about where, you want to be headed. And that's what usually produces a lot of content. People, sit there trying to crank out these long word counts by just writing about the flowers, when you could really just be taking the story somewhere, which is the whole point of what you're doing. Number one. Number two, I feel it's important to begin with the end in mind, which is kind of the other thing with storytelling, is that you have the plot up here. As much as a lot of this can easily be improvisational, like there is some element to it that needs to be pre-planned. And I hate to say that, but you've got to have some sort of formal structure somewhere. So just beginning with the end in mind, open to the possibilities of anything. It at least gives you some structure, so, you have like a setting, timetable to work with, at least some key events, and so when things hit a lull, you know where to go next, and you're not just kind of like, oh, well, other guy I'm writing with, do you want to do the thing? What else is there? And I don't know, there's like a confidence, because it's really necessary for you as a storyteller to know the rules so you can properly manage the site. We have to learn where the boundaries are. And that, sometimes it can be vague. I'm not saying things aren't clearly outlined in terms of the rules, but, there aren't any rules on what kind of plots you can come up with necessarily. There's a lot of within reason type of stuff, and you never know if you don't try. Which leads me to another point, which may not necessarily have anything to do with thinking like a storyteller, but it has everything to do with just the fantasy of role-playing in general, and fear of failure. And I think that a lot of us are content to fantasize about what we want to do, right? Rather than going out into the world and doing it, because in our imaginations, we never have to endure failure. Now, imagine that as applied to role-playing, and what we have are a whole bunch of people who fear to take risks with their characters, because the same fantasies and daydreams that we distract ourselves with our own real life, fantasizing about the job or the house that we want, The same principles apply to our roleplay characters. So because they're in our imaginations, we haven't really given any margin of error there. There's no place for us to go wrong. We're not, and even if we try to imagine us going wrong, it can be difficult, which is why writing books is so hard. It explains the necessity of having storytellers. Because when you finally do hit the wall of, well, how can I fail at doing this without making it arbitrary? What's really standing in my way? What am I not aware of? That's on the storyteller. That's their job, right? And I think as players, we can provide that for one another. Because it is, even when you do force yourself out of your comfort zone to try and really figure out what's holding your character back, in developing their skills, situationally, it can be more challenging. So do your friends a favor and the people that you write with, and really try to be cognizant of, okay, who's driving the story right now? Is it me or them? Or both of us? Or none of us? If so, am I going to be the one to take initiative to move things forward? And what can I do to establish some clearly defined obstacles for my partner, because they may have a hard time wrapping their head around what is and isn't feasible in this situation, especially if I'm the one driving the momentum. 2. 3. The last thing I want to add, and I just wanted to take some people's temperature on this, is that I find that as role players, we're also fascinated with human behavior and psychology to a certain extent, right? Because we are trying to portray it, which means we have to be into it on some level, I guess. So my last thing I wanted to add would be that I've recently really gotten into Jungian typology with Myers-Briggs, or socionics, depending on what you prefer. But also the Enneagram and a whole bunch of other kind of personalities, assessment type of things. But, all of that aside, in particular for MBTI, right? So that's the Jungian typology, where basically Carl Jung came up with a whole bunch of cool stuff and then decided that he wasn't interested in that and moved on to archetypes. Well, then after that, basically a couple of Myers-Briggs, Cooks-Briggs or Cooks-Myers or whatever. So 2 women developed some interest in Carl Jung's work, and then what they did is they went and they systematized it, which is the best way I can put it for the layman. So now, you have 16 personality types, and basically it's all about the cognitive functions, so how people think. Not to say that certain people think certain ways without the ability to think any other way. That's not true. It basically outlines, I guess the theory of all the different functions the brain can perform, puts them on an axis, and then shows them how we as individuals all prioritize them differently, which is why we behave in different ways, but we're still capable of anything, which I find interesting. Now, it has been criticized for being relatively unscientific, which it's harder to prove these things. And I can see why it might be criticized. However, I found it to be eerily accurate, and so take it or leave it. I always say it's never good to be dogmatic about anything, but always just take the best, trim the tree, take the best parts, leave the rest. So, that said, I suppose what I've been able to do is take all of the knowledge that I had on, how the cognitive functions work, and I was able to go back and revisit all of my characters and rewrite all their profiles, which I have, which was challenging, but fun. And I felt that I had more words to say on the matter in the first place, because I had, the way the human brain basically defined in terms that I think anyone could understand when you become fluent in it. For that reason, it becomes easier to roleplay those characters. Because let's face it, the whole point of this is that we're going into it with a person, and the external circumstances, they vary, and we're reacting to those circumstances, or we're attempting to control them or drive them like people do. And it's all about seeing the dynamic change that occurs when that happens, when we take a concept and we stick it in chaos to see how, when we pull it back out of the fire, how it looks, right? So, or at least that is how it is for me. But in order to do that, you have to have a really clear understanding of what it is in the first place in order to understand how it's changed, or how it could change. So that said, it might be of value to some people to learn more about Jungian typology. I can actually do another video if you guys are super interested, because I find it fascinating, and it's something I really could do, get a lot of content out of, especially using my characters as examples, since I have them all down. I was thinking about writing it or doing a video blog. Let me know what you think, if you think that's cool, or whatever. And this is Kate Dunn. Ooh. That was my full name. Oh well, find me on Facebook. Signing off.